Welcome to the Creative Business Design Lab. I am Jessica Abel, and this time out, we are talking about courage before confidence, how to take imperfect action and make things happen without being absolutely positively sure that everything's going to be fine before you even start, which is kind of impossible. So we're going to try not to do that. My guest today is Henry Tong. Henry is a self-starting, self-producing documentary filmmaker whose original series, Makers Who Inspire, has amassed over 1.85 million views, and he's won multiple awards. Henry parlayed his personal success into a full-time job with ConvertKit, which is the email service that I use. So if you are on my email list, if you got an email reminding you about this, it came from the company that he works for. And he works for them making documentary films about creators, which is what he was already doing on his own. So you see how these things work together. So the question we're going to talk about today, and you'll see why I invited Henry in a sec, is why do we need courage before confidence? Why is it important to go ahead and act bravely even when you're not totally sure? This is my take on it. People ask me all the time how to sell their work, how to get attention for their work, how to get clients and build their businesses. And usually they have something amazing that they're trying to do, but they're waiting for magic to happen and for people to just discover them somehow. Or sometimes they're doing some content marketing, they're doing social media, they're blogging, something like that. And it feels like a lot of activity and it is a lot of work, but doing all that stuff can actually be a form of hiding from what's really difficult, which is just boldly putting your work in front of people and doing it even when you don't really feel totally ready. And in my personal experience, you're never going to feel absolutely ready before you do a thing. It's only afterwards when you look back and you go like, I didn't die. So I guess I was kind of ready and think that was enough. Like I was ready enough at that moment. So here's the detail about Henry's biography that inspired today's theme. He started out making films and submitting them to festivals and winning awards when he was still in high school. And then he decided to go pro and become a freelancer. As soon as he graduated high school, while all his friends went off to college, he started his own business and dived right into client work. Henry, how does this all land for you?
Well, it was a learning curve, that's for sure. A lot of mistakes were made. They were expensive mistakes. But I'm glad that I chose to go that path because when my friends graduated high school, I had a few in Melbourne, and I'm in Australia at the moment. That's why you can see the sun coming in. I'm from Australia. So a lot of people, friends of mine, went to school in Melbourne, pretty good film school. When they started graduating, 3-4 years after we all graduated from high school, I saw them go through a lot of the similar stuff that I was going through right after I graduated high school. It was just took them longer to get to that point because they were still in school. So I'm glad that I made that decision to go and make those mistakes and learn on the job instead of going through school.
Right. Did you see them not making those mistakes because they waited longer?
Well, they had to make those mistakes eventually. It just took a bit longer
Right.
to get to that point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I want to hear about the mistakes. We're going to get there, but like basically this idea of like, I mean, your particular case is, I think, a really striking example of somebody who was like, you know what, screw it. I'm just doing this right now. And I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait for permission from anybody. I'm sure. And well, tell me if I'm right. Were people telling you, no, you should go to school?
Yeah. Here in Australia, it's very common to go to college right after high school because it's so much more affordable. It gets to the point where some people, I mean, it's such an expectation that people just choose a degree to do or a course to do without really knowing. And some people switch 2 or 3 times throughout the undergraduate. So yeah, a lot of people were expecting me to go to college. I was a straight A student up to the point where I decided not to go. I mean, I continued past that point, but at that point, my principal and my teachers were all like, "Wait, what? Why are you choosing to do film, let alone not go to college?" And yeah, there was some pushback. For me, I don't know, like I'm like an all or nothing person. So when I get that resistance, I feel really, I don't know, it's like a stubborn trigger in me that gets triggered. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to use the frustration that I feel that people aren't seeing what I'm seeing or the resistance that I'm getting. I'm going to use that as motivation to get it done.
I love that. Yeah. Use that stubborn gene to just like push yourself through the thing. Did you have doubts at that point about whether you should be going to college, following the traditional path, or going out in the world? Or were you just like, yeah, this is fine? I mean,
I
you
had
were
doubts.
18
Yeah.
or whatever, so that's a
I
different
was,
place.
it was a different brain place. I was just fun. I mean, like, I remember there was a distinct point where I was like, oh, I should. I realized there was a moment. It was 2 or a year and a half after I graduated high school, and I'd chosen this path already. But I realized like, oh shit, I have to make money, and where is that gonna come from? So that moment did definitely happen. But like the lead up to it, there was just a lot of momentum that was happening with my career, even towards the end of high school, because one of the films that I made was, screened and awarded in the U.S. And I met a lot of my mentors who are still my mentors now in that festival. So it was just a lot of exciting things happening. So that sort of sped me along for a little while and gave me the courage to just do it without knowing. But there was definitely like uncertainty. This career pathway is obviously not, there's no guaranteed path to success. So that was definitely on my mind a little bit, probably more on my parents' minds. But yeah, I didn't think about it that much until after I made that choice. And I think for me, my philosophy is always like that approach worked because my philosophy is always kind of like, I'm gonna back myself into a corner and not give myself any backup plans, because then I'm forced to make it work. So I specifically didn't choose a secondary backup career. I didn't. A lot of my friends sometimes they were doing this as well at the same time I was doing it, and some of them had a different undergraduate degree that they were doing while they were trying to make this be the thing that they were doing, just to have it as a backup. And I was like, nah, I don't think I'm going to do that because then I can dedicate 100%, and I have no choice but to dedicate 100% to this. So when I had that moment of realization, I was like, well, I better make this work.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's really it's really powerful. The idea of no backup plan. I think that's really smart. It's like you're engineering your commitment
Yep.
to it. And so even if you are going to have doubts at some point, you still are going to be able to see it through. You have to see it through. You have no choice, right? You have no choice but to see it through. At least you perceive it that way. I'm sure, again, like people in their late teens and early 20s think a little bit differently about risk than people who are older, right? So I'm sure there were certain elements where you're just like, what, this is going to be fine. Where later you might have had other thoughts about it. And in some ways it's good that you did it when you did,
Yeah, that definitely helped. I think back to that decision now, but actually even more than that, the decision to move to the United States, like I just did it.
Wait. Let's go in order here. So
Okay.
you won awards and you were getting attention and found mentors through winning a competition in the United States. And then you immediately or later, you started working freelance because you needed to make money to support your filmmaking, your personal filmmaking work, right? And then you moved to the US, or what's the order there? How did that happen? So again, like,
Yes.
guy in Australia up and moves to the US to try to make it.
Yeah, so basically the highlight points of that journey is graduated high school, decided not to go to college, did a lot of freelancing here between 2014 and 2019, so 5 years. Didn't make a lot of money. The industry here in Australia is, freelancing anywhere as hard as it is, and especially at the beginning of your career, but here in Australia, it's especially difficult because there's not as much value put on the creative industries. There's not as much money to go around. And so you have to fight harder and it's for much less. So that was an interesting environment to come up in. And then over those years, I also kept coming to the US just on my own trips. And whenever I'd come, I'd film little things for my own YouTube channel, which is where I host the series that I make, Makers Who Inspire. And progressively over the years, I think I came for 4 or 5 years in a row before I actually moved. Progressively, the people that I was making films about grew bigger and bigger. So it went from like the first ones I made with people here, friends of mine in Adelaide, the city I'm from. And then in the US, it got to like principal dancers at New York City Ballet, or Ronnie Chang, the Daily Show comedian. He's also in Crazy Rich Asians and Shang-Chi. So it grew that way. And then eventually I was like, you know what, like I'm not getting anywhere here in Australia. At least I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere as fast as I want to be getting. There was progress, but not as fast as I wanted it. Whenever I came to the US, it was like, wow, there's there's actually like people here who do this, value it, and they say that they can give me work. So I guess if I'm not like, if it's not working in Australia, why not just give it a shot somewhere else? You know, what could I lose? And then I realized I qualified for a special like visa for artists. Went through the whole process. It cost like 16,000 Australian dollars to get that first visa. I didn't go to college, so that money was like, well, might as well invest in this and see how it goes. I used a lawyer who, you know, and people advised me, people who have the visa. I spoke to a lot of people before making this decision, and they were like, we reckon you've got a very good chance. And I managed to get that visa, which was quite surprising under Trump as well. And I was like, you know what? I will just go to the States, spend 3 months there and figure it out and come back to Australia if I need to. Left to go there in October 2019. And around that time as well, ConvertKit, which is the company I have a full-time job with right now, I was connected to them through one of the mentors that I met in that very first film festival when I was still in high school. He's a producer of at Disney. He did Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King. He connected me with them. He said, hey, you know, like, congrats on the visa. I know this company wants to make the same types of films. They already have your films on their mood board. So why not just hire you to do it because they're looking? So I connected with ConvertKit, went through this whole interview process that was quite extensive, actually, more than it should have been for just a contract role. And it made sense later because after making a couple of films for them, they were like, you want to join the team full time? And I'm like, cool. We had a conversation about it, of course. I never thought I'd get a full-time job. But this company is incredible, the way that they support creators, and, you know, their mission is to serve creators, and the way they support the creators on their team. So I was like, all right, I'll join. And then the pandemic hits, and without that job, I wouldn't have been able to stay in the US. So I ended up staying in the US the whole time that for the 3 years essentially that I had the visa. And I'm here to renew the visa. So that's why I'm back in Australia at the moment. But yeah, that's essentially the big plot points of the journey. So moving to the US was also a decision that was like not going to college, but bigger, I think, because now I think about it and I was like, how I would not do that now. Because it's like, no, I was literally just going to move and freelance. This ConvertKit thing had only happened like 3 months after I moved there. So, but I just felt like, you know, I have a better chance in the States, and I love America, and there's nothing happening here. So give it a shot, see what happens, and it worked out.
So another point then, you raised a couple of things that jumped out at me. One was you had these mentors, you listened to them, you kept in touch with them, and you were willing to sort of use their advice to help support you through difficult decisions. So that's number one. Relationships made a big difference. Number two, you did a ton of research about this visa, talking to people, how it worked. You know, you got a lawyer, you got professional help. You did jump into it not knowing what was going to happen, but you didn't jump into it like you just took a plane to the US and see if they'd let you stay. You know, was it like you were planning it, you know, and like doing it intentionally. And so, you know, and again, committing to that plan meant investing money, investing time, all those kinds of things. And there was something else that's going to come back to me, I'm sure of it, but hasn't yet. But yeah, this idea that like you wouldn't now, but you did then, like, I'm sure you don't regret having done it, but like the person you are now, you might not have taken that risk because you know how risky, I guess in retrospect, how risky it really was.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to you about this, I think, even when we met a few years ago, a couple of years ago now, but I think this job, because I've never had a full-time job until now, and it was a learning curve to begin with, but I feel like I've settled into it pretty well. But having a full-time job, I've got a like a level of security and comfort and stability that I didn't have before. And it was like, I think not having that kind of comfort and stability just made it normal for me to be like, you know what, if my bank account hits zero, it is what it is. And I might as well move, might as well do this. But now that I have that comfort and stability, it's harder to imagine making that decision. So now the challenge is to still push myself in that way, in spite of having all of this stability and comfort that I didn't know before.
That is so smart, because I think that's really like the loss aversion is such a huge part of not wanting to take these kinds of risks. That now you have something to lose that you didn't have to lose before. Which doesn't mean you're going to stop taking these risks, because in fact, you've taken huge risks and they've paid off, and I think part of having the whole idea of courage before confidence is that you actually get confidence. Like the result of this is confidence, because you do the thing and you go, oh, that was okay. Like it was scary and it was a roller coaster, but I did it and it had this result to it. And I got to say, across the board, doing all the interviews with the Autonomous Creative and all this other stuff, and I'm sure, and we talked about this when you interviewed me for this ConvertKit film that you made. One of the most consistent things that every single person who I've talked to who's successful says is, oh, there was this time when I just started doing this thing. I just started making this thing and I did it because I wanted to do it and because it was what made most sense to me creatively. And I fully committed to it. And that I had no idea what was going to happen, but that's what opened all these doors. That's the piece that 5 years later, so-and-so found and, did whatever it is. That turned into this kind of opportunity that now is it makes my name, and it's just like, you get found, your work gets seen because you're out there making it, doing stuff. It doesn't happen if you're not out there doing stuff, and you don't know at first what's going to happen. You can't know ahead of time, right? So it's just impossible to predict that and set yourself up like, rock solid, boundaries and say like, this is absolutely going to work. You have to be willing to put yourself out there a little bit. But the nice thing is that like people overestimate the risk of it. They overestimate the downside and underestimate the upside. I think the upside is huge, and the downsides, yeah, stuff can happen. Tell us about your expensive mistakes.
Okay. Yeah, it's just like business stuff that I wish I'd known and I know now. It's like how to price things, how to read people. One of the most expensive mistakes was just partnering with the wrong person, like right out of high school. People like, oh, he does film. I know someone who does film. Let me connect him with them. Someone I started working with seemed really good on the surface, but now in hindsight, I realized like he didn't have a lot of his stuff together. It's he he was this guy, a young dude who had a media company or media collective, and now I can see, because that it exactly was what all he wanted to do with this was like take photos and make videos about clubbing or parties that he wanted to go to, and like or models that he wanted to go on dates with. I remember the first thing he got me to like do as sort of an exercise to audition for like the role was to edit for free this video that had been shot of this model that he was dating at the time. Just walking through the botanical gardens. I don't know. But that, and then I didn't know, right? I don't know anything. I'm like 18. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll just do all of this. And then I started bringing real clients in, like a hospitality company that manages like hotels in Singapore and like Melbourne and Brisbane. And like 20th Century Fox Promotions, they were promoting a movie called Spy that had just come out with Melissa McCarthy, and they wanted to do some like activation video here in South Australia. They didn't know how to, like, the guy running this company didn't know how to manage those types of clients, and it got like like the communication and like the negotiation was getting a little bit sketchy. Eventually, after a year or two, like me and a couple other people in the company realized like, oh, this is not a vibe, because like he had gotten us to do a bunch of stuff, and it turned out that there was a lot of conflicts of interest in these jobs that he was getting us to work, and he didn't pay us, of course. And he'd say things like, oh, I've already set the budget. It's if you want to, like if you need an extra shooter or you need an extra day, then you have to convince people to work for free. Those kinds of things. And like, yeah, it's just a lot of like sketchy stuff, a lot of very sketchy stuff. So I had to learn all those things the hard way. But I think everyone has to go through stuff like that at the start of their careers, no matter whether or not they went to school. So those were some of those expensive mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, I think learning how, like, the importance of contracts and vetting people and, getting paid up front part of your fee, and all those kinds of things are, you can read books about that, but until you
Do it
actually
yourself.
experience it, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
for sure. Can you tell us about your pricing mistakes? This is a common one.
Pricing. Yeah, I mean, I'm still figuring out pricing, it's funny sometimes now, like ConvertKit encourages you to do side hustles, outside of the work that we do at the company full time. So I've done a little bit here and there over the last few years where I can fit it in. And some people still ask me to bring the price down a bit, but I've got other people who are like, you're charging too little. And I'm like, what? So that's still something that I'm figuring out. But pricing mistakes to begin with, I don't know, like charging far too little and not like not factoring in all of like the things that would go into it, like and clearly saying, okay, this is including only like 2 revisions or 3 revisions or whatever. There were times where I went to like 7 or 8 revisions on a video or something because a client just wasn't on like a birthday event video, because a client really wanted this or that. So learning how to like factor
So
that into the
boundaries.
cost. Boundaries is important. Also, what I found that's really helped me, and I'm still doing it right now, is tracking my time. I know it's a little bit like, it's counterintuitive sometimes, but I run a timer when I'm editing. And of course, when I'm on set, like I know how long I was there. And then I enter it into a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet calculates the number of hours that I worked on the job and like divides it by the total amount I got paid or whatever to show me the hourly rate. And that helps because it helps me keep track of how long things take. Now, if someone asks me to do something that I've done before, I can go and look and be like, okay, it'll take this much time, so I know how many hours to quote for it. But it also makes sure that I can sort of like refer to that to see if I've been getting the hourly rate that I had set out to get on that particular job, because it keeps me accountable. So just tracking your time as a freelancer, that kind of stuff is very important. Creating a savings account, separate savings account to put money into for taxes, factoring taxes into it. I think everyone's gotten hit with like a tax bill at the end of the financial year. That was more than they expected, because you never think to do that. So things like that, they don't teach you that kind of stuff, even at school here. Like if you go to college here, it's like they don't teach you that, which is a problem that I have with the system here. They cultivate a mindset of dependency on external factors to get success, when they should be teaching creators business and all of the logistical stuff like that.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I've been teaching in art school in the US for 20 plus years now, and it varies what students get depending on who's teaching the professional practice class, but usually it's just one class, and it's very hard to fit all that stuff in. And yeah, I mean, I think this stuff's so important. I teach professional practice. I'm starting my professional practice semester on Tuesday. So I just am revising my syllabus, and my syllabus is full of like business model and, financial, whatever. But I've taught this class like 4 or 5 times, and the students, I think they get a lot out of it, but it's more like an overall sense that there's stuff you need to know and do, which is good. But like the specifics of it are just like, they just are not, it's too fast. Like you need to have much more immersion in this. And in some ways you have to have that on the ground experience. And this is the other piece of this is like, Ira Glass talks about the gap, right? The gap between your taste and what you envision for yourself and for your work and what you're actually able to do. And that the only way through the gap is to make a lot of stuff, just keep making stuff. And I think that's very true. I mean, the idea debt concept that I teach about in the Creative Focus Workshop and elsewhere, where people sit with all these ideas and they kind of mull and stew about all these things, but don't actually finish and complete and move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. A lot of it is about perfectionism, thinking like you can somehow, again, future-proof. If you just nail down all the details, it's going to be good enough to get out there and not have like be bulletproof. Nobody's going to be able to criticize it. And you're going to get all the way to the other side of the gap, the big gap, that way, instead of by the painful iteration of project after project, birthday party videos and whatever
Weddings
that you need to do in order to get to, an award-winning documentary series. Like you have to be able to go through this stuff on the way. That's the only way to get to the other side, that's why at an essential level, that's why Courage Before Confidence is so important, is because that is how you actually get to be the creator you want to be. Aside from the money part and the recognition and all that stuff also comes as a result of taking risky steps with your creative work. But at a basic level, just making the work you want to be making doesn't happen unless you're willing to just commit, do it, finish, move on, keep going. I've been looking through all my old stuff, getting ready to donate a lot of archives and things to an archive of comics related stuff. And, I look at my stuff from, I don't know, like 98 or whatever. It's just like,
yeah,
a little horrifying, but if I hadn't done that, I couldn't have done what I did later. It's just not, you can't go from one end to the other end. You have to go through the middle. And at the time, those things were things that I was proud of and happy with. And I said, like, saying yes to another piece of this is, I think, saying yes to opportunities that come up, like saying yes to ConvertKit, saying yes to this, your very first festival that you entered, seeing the poster and saying like, I'm doing that. One of my big ones is saying yes to doing nonfiction comic strips in the New City, which was is a tabloid newspaper in Chicago. And they had me go out and cover, like, what was the first one I did? I think it was Elizabeth Wurtzel, Prozac Nation, which was like a very, like, it was like the hot book of the time and like, everybody's scuttlebutt, whatever. And I went out and covered her like book, her reading, and like interviewed people and did like a man on the street thing. And I did those strips for the New City 2-3 times a year for a few years. And one of those ended up in Ira Glass's filing cabinet, which is why 3 years after that, he pulled it out and looked me up in the phone book, on paper, by the way, paper phone book. That's how old I am. Looked me up in the phone book, called me, and invited me to collaborate with him on the first radio book that I did, the Radio and Illustrated Guide. So saying yes to this thing that was like, I don't know how to do this. Oh my God, I don't know. And like saying yes to Ira Glass when he says, do you want to collaborate with me? It's like, in some ways it's a no-brainer, right? You're being asked to do something, but it's not like I was paid a lot for the New City strip. It wasn't aligned with the fiction work that I was doing, but it just opened doors, it made opportunities available to me. And I'm really, obviously very happy that I did that.
Yeah, some of the benefits of the series that I was making was that I got to meet a lot of artists, people that I looked up to, and then have conversations with them personally when we weren't shooting. Even when we were interviewing, a lot of the questions I was asking them was stuff I wanted to know. But in our own time, we talk as well. And some of the best advice that I got is from a painter, a really successful painter. And he was saying, you never know who's looking at what you're making, even though like get only 5,000 views or whatever. And he was right, because there have been many times, just like with you, people have connected with me in the last few years, and they said, "Oh, I saw this thing that you did," and I'm like, "Really? That?" Like this guy Johnny Harris, he's a big YouTuber now. He used to work for Vox, and he does a lot of things on his own channel with the New York Times and other stuff now. I like his work. I've always sort of watched what he did, and he started this travel company, and he's getting other people to make videos, contribute to the YouTube channel for this travel company, course company. And yeah, they reached out to me, and I'm like, how did you find my stuff? And it turns out his wife was watching, who's also a YouTuber that I watch. Both of them had seen my films from years ago. So it's weird.
It is weird, but it's also like, it just shows that having a huge audience isn't always what makes the difference. It's having
the right
engaged
people
audience, an audience who cares, an audience who, in this case, it's like the right audience, in that this is somebody who's influential. That's not always the case though, but it's like people who really care about your work, that's going to make a ton of difference. And I mean, you just never know what comes out of it, right? You never know what's going to happen. And that, I think one of the biggest things for people who are trying to figure out how to like step forward boldly is that fear of the unknown. Like, what is going to happen? I need to know what's going to happen. And you have to live with the unknowing and just like let it be out there. Let your early work be published still. And all of those other things. And be visible, be seen, have your your trajectory over time be traceable. All of those things are, they can be difficult for people, that can be hard for people to sort of face that, which I very much understand. There's one other thing you mentioned as we were getting ready to for this interview or for this conversation, where you talked about how one of the big things you're struggling with at this point is that you do work a full-time job doing what you love, making films about creative people, but that's made it difficult for you to have this side hustle and do your own work because it's like the same thing. This isn't really about the topic, but I just think it's an interesting topic that that comes up a lot. And I liked you have this advice from Don Hahn, who's your mentor, who's helped you in a number of times through your career, to have a hobby or creative passion that has nothing to do with what you do at work. How does that play? What are you doing in that regard?
Yeah, he gave me that advice because I was trying to make a documentary for myself, personal documentary, while I was also making documentaries at work. And he said, like, this is why I don't do film stuff. He's the producer who did Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, Nightmare Before Christmas. He's done a lot of Disney movies. He says this is why I don't do any film stuff at all, like in my own time. Whenever I go and visit his place, it's like a painting studio. He paints. So he's like, this is why I paint, because like it just has nothing to do with it. I can relax and I can still enjoy it, blah, blah, blah. So now, like for me, those things are film photography. It's still camera related, so it's not as different as it should be, I think, but it helps quite a bit. So it's not cheap, but the film photography stuff, if you're into it, that helps for me. And I also have really gotten into cycling. So like just biking around New York, that's a lot of fun. So it's become one of the core parts of my identity in the last couple of years. So those two things together, I'll take the camera out for a bike ride. That really helps. I'm considering taking up like archery or something really random when I get back to the city. So maybe something, recreational like that too. But yeah, that was some really good advice that I got from him.
Yeah, no, I like that, because one of the things I realized that part of my, my motto when I was in my 20s was dare to be bad. So do stuff and be bad at it, and that's okay. But what it kind of led to, that and just continually creating stuff and trying to get it out there, was instrumentalizing like basically everything I was doing. So every time I'd be like, I'm going to make a print that doesn't have to do with my comics, I would be like, it's going to be an ad for my comics. I'm going to make a poster for my comic, and like, I'm going to do some painting. Oh, that'll be a cover for my comics. I was taking everything and kind of feeding it into the comics, with the result that I kind of didn't keep doing those things, as sort of they dropped off. So I feel like it's like part and parcel with enthusiastically making everything, getting everything out there. Still have to create space for these other kind of work.
One of the things that the founder of ConvertKit has said to me, Nathan, he said something really wise recently. He said, when your output is tied to your motivation, then that doesn't usually work, because when there's a slump in your output, then you lose your motivation. So you need to find other ways to motivate yourself.
Yeah, that's very smart. All right, so we've got a bunch of great questions. So I'm going to grab those and let's see what we can do with them. All right, so Sign asks, what do you do when you've been courageous, gotten out over your skis, and find yourself unable to deliver on your plans? What do you think?
Trying to think back to when that happened. I don't know. It sucks. Like, I think for me, it's like when I know that I always think that I would rather try than not try, because if it's like, at least then I can say I tried. Whenever it's like, whether it's a festival or lost opportunity with I didn't get into a festival I wanted to get into back when I was doing that, or like I pitched for this job and put in a lot of this time and didn't get the project, or like, yeah, just visa stuff, which is some of the stuff that I'm going through right now. I'm glad that I at least tried, because then I can say that to myself. And then you just got to look at what worked and study what didn't work, have that like couple of days of feeling bad for myself, and then I'll sort of like figure out what can be done next. I prefer to put things into action and not just sort of sit around and think about things too much sometimes, because if there's something that I can control and something I can do about it, then I feel better. Um, so yeah, like part of it is like just thinking about what you can learn from that situation and what you can do differently next time, and use that to push yourself into something again in the future, and hopefully it'll turn out better because you've learned something.
It's one of those terrible cliches, like there's no such thing as failure. There's just like learning experiences,
Yeah,
which
it's difficult when money's involved though.
let's not go too far with that. But yes, I mean, I get the basic of it. My thought initially was that there are a few things. I think that first of all, I would say my first reaction when I'm like, oh, things are going sideways, is to go into improv mode and just like figure something out. Like it's the adrenaline kicks in. And this happens all the time, like in a classroom situation or a coaching situation or something where somebody asks a question or needs something or does something where I'm like, oh, we got to deal with that. And I'm like, just kind of like moving through. And I actually really enjoy that kind of excitement and stress, like that performance stress. And one of the things I wanted to make sure to mention is if anybody who's listening to this is somebody who feels stress and anxiety around, I mean, obviously you're here probably because you're thinking about some stress and anxiety around, courage before confidence and getting out there. Try reframing that stress and anxiety as excitement, like pre-performance excitement, that you're like, oh, this could be really weird, and like get yourself kind of like hyped up to do the thing, instead of looking at it as like, oh, that's a bad sign, I should relax now, I need some tea, like use it to kind of fuel you, as opposed to using it as a sort of explanation of why you're not going to do the thing. And I think that's the energy I get into, like if I'm on stage and like something like the tech isn't working or something for like a talk, I'm like, all right, I'll just yell, and I'm just, I just will do something. So that's one kind of fixing the situation. Doesn't always work, not always appropriate, so I don't always do that. The second thing though is communicate and apologize. Like if something's going, I'm not able to deliver, that I can't finish on time, or I can't finish at all, or I realize it's a totally bad fit, or like something like that. The number one thing I try to do, and boy is it hard, is to communicate with whoever I'm doing this thing with or for, and just tell them what's going on and be totally honest about it. And if it's something like you were saying earlier, Henry, with like somebody who's like a bad collaborator or whatever, I'm just going to be like, I'm out. Like I can't, I will try to come up with some very, like non-personal way to talk about it, but I'll just be like, oh, things have come up and I'm going to be, and just get myself out of the situation. If it's my fault and somebody is waiting for me, then I just try to really communicate, renegotiate, and like, I've dealt with so many people who don't, that I just feel like I've been burned so much as the person who's waiting for something, that I just try really hard not to let that happen. And that communication will fix so many things. Just apologize for being late. Don't over explain, don't make them feel like they need to make you feel better. Like, don't put it on them. Just say like, hey, I take responsibility. How can we move forward with this? And yeah, that's what I try to do.
Good answer. That's a good answer. It applies to some situations that I'm in right now too. I'm gonna take some notes.
Exactly. All right. So Kate says, how do you know which projects just need courage and to dive right into, whereas some projects need more time to incubate? How can you tell which ideas are ready enough to get going on? Good question. Kind of personal, individual, like depends, but what do you think?
I mean, I'm still figuring that out as well. Like I said, that film that I was trying to make while I was doing my work at ConvertKit, I thought it was a project where I just have to dive right in and just make it happen. But then at a certain point, I realized like I don't have the perspective to be able to give the film what it needs currently. And so it's okay to put it to the one side for the time being. It's always going to be there if I want to complete it again in the future, and it can only benefit from some time to age well, you know? So I think it's a process that it's a learning process, and it's something that I think for me, it helped when I was like, I sat back and I sort of tried to stop thinking about what was actionable about the project and really think about how it was making me feel and what I was really able to give to it, and whether that was benefiting me or whether it was benefiting the project. And I realized like it wasn't. So that was something that helped me realize like, oh, this is something that needs more time instead of just brute force.
Which is tough for
Yeah,
people like you and me to acknowledge
yeah,
that. I think we're both a little bit brute force people who kind of like roll through
yeah,
stuff.
push.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
what I found. What?
I encourage with everybody, I encourage an action bias and knowing that it's okay. Like to get back to the previous question, to connect this to the previous question, it's okay to start something and then stop, like you just were talking about, that it's okay to recognize that like, I'm out there, but I'm not really ready for this. And even if it's in public, to publicly put a pause on something, so that if you're releasing a webcomic or you're doing a series of something and you're like, I just need a break here. Again, just transparency makes a ton of difference. And we also, I think, always overestimate how much anybody else cares about how fast our stuff comes out.
Mm.
It's very rare for somebody to care. Like, hey, where's your next episode of whatever? Like, that's just not that common.
Also look back at the stuff that you've made in the past, if there's anything similar, and think about whether or not that required more time or whether it's something that you could just go ahead and do without thinking about too much. That helps.
Yeah.
That's how I sort of judge what a project needs to begin with sometimes as well.
Yeah. Although if it's something new, you won't necessarily know.
Yeah. That's when you have to figure it out.
Yeah. But also I think that can be a little bit of a trap if you're like, oh, well, this thing I did in the past, I could have used more time on it because you did it when you were younger and you could do better now. Like you have to be able to like kind of put yourself in the sort of, given what I had then, was this the best I could have done? Like you can't get yourself in a situation, you just mustn't get yourself in a situation where you're thinking like, oh, if only I'd waited on this project that I did when I was 30 and did it when I was 40, but then you wouldn't have been able to do the stuff when you were 40, that's not possible. Like you can't, it's apples and oranges in that sense. And that's why I think action bias is so important, just to be like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. Whatever. Like, what's the worst that could happen? It's a good question to ask yourself. What is the worst that could happen? Honestly.
Exactly.
Okay, so Katie asks, for your expensive mistakes that you made in your early career, how did you calculate what was worth the risk? And I think that we already looked at that a little bit, where it's like I don't know how much you were calculating the risk. You were just doing stuff and then figuring out, oh, that wasn't so great.
Worth the risk. I mean, all of it was worth the risk because I learned something from it. Even like, honestly, probably it was the ones that were the mistakes and didn't work out probably were worth more because it showed me what I shouldn't be doing, or, something that needed to change. Calculate, is that the word that she used? Calculate
What was worth the risk.
Calculate. I don't know. Like at a certain point, it's helpful to do a retro after something doesn't work, or when something does work, obviously, but at a certain point, it's not helpful to keep calculating. So I give myself like a week after the project's done to reflect on it and write if it helps, journal about it, all that stuff. And then after that, I generally don't return to it for a little while because I don't want that to be occupying a part of my brain that could cause doubt for another project that I was doing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've started writing debriefs on most of my projects. I try to remember to do it, where I write, here's what happened. Here's what happened. And I use the question, so what? Like, here's what happened. So what? Well, this is what this means. This is the takeaway from whatever the result is. So Katie's actually asking about real numbers also, like how much money did folks put into projects for how long before they start to see money back? What kind of investment seems worth it? And it's the kind of thing where, like, for me with a business project where I'm like releasing a course or something like that, I'll write like, well, here's how much time we put into this, and here's how much, financial like investment we put into it. Here's what we got back. What's the level of profitability on this thing? And then, so what? Does that mean we don't do this again? Does it mean we do it differently? Does it mean, it was good and we can do better? Like what, trying to get takeaways from big projects. Like if we're doing big projects, I always try to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think spending $16,000 on immigrating to the US, that's an investment.
Well, yeah, that was worth the risk because that's the money I earned while I was in the US is far exceeding that. But that, I mean, calculating, okay, then like that's something I knew when I moved to the US. I need to make at least $16,000 to like make this worthwhile outside of, the money that I need to make to just sustain my life. So that was something that I knew. That's what I calculated. But sometimes it's difficult to figure out what the actual metric number is, whether it's amounts of money and whether that was worth the risk, or whether it's like a return on investment based on the metrics that you get, on impressions and traffic and engagement. Anything with that kind of stuff, brand content, is very difficult to calculate, So at a certain point, you have to be comfortable with just having risk, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're working solo, a lot of what you're investing is time, most of the time, more than money.
Yeah. That's why I calculate my time. I measure it, and I'm like, that's honestly something that I calculate more when it comes to like the question, like calculating the risk than money sometimes, because it's like, is that a valuable use of my time? And if not, then I know not to do it again.
Yeah. Hard won lessons for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So Ray asks, how do you maintain the resolve to see your creative endeavors through in the face of uncertainty? Let's see if I can just boil this down a little bit. Even though people are at the heart of what I want to co-create, I regularly get into staring contests with doubt, with the pervasive and invasive question of what if people don't want what I offer? And the juxtaposition between wanting to create for the sake of myself and others, and said creativity needing to sustain me and being able to afford access to resources I need not just survive, but thrive.
That's the resources to survive and thrive is the part that's challenging.
Yeah.
For me, it was, I didn't, like I said, because I just graduated high school, it was something that I didn't have to think about for the first year and a half or so. And then by then I was so deep into it that I had no choice but to just keep going.
Well, you did.
But
you could have just gone to college or something.
I guess, yeah, you're right. I don't know. I think what I found is I've always found that the amount of doubt is never, it's never as bad as you think it is. I think generally people are risk averse. Even if you're not a risk averse person, people are always kind of risk averse and conservative and worried, because that's the way that we've been bred to ensure survival. But what's the worst that could happen? I think that's the question.
Right. It is.
I mean, you're right. I could have just gone to college. So that's the worst that could have happened. I could have changed jobs. I could have moved back home. I could move back home, change careers. And that feels like the end of the world to me right now, but like, it's not the worst thing that could happen, I think.
I mean, who knows? Like it's an entirely different life. Who knows what it would look like? It could be great. It's not that it better or worse. I don't know,
Yeah, but generally I found that it's actually the opposite. Whenever I've gone and done something, the return on investment's been way higher than I expected, and the risks sometimes don't even manifest.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think that the key thing that I read in this question is get into staring contests with doubt, with the pervasive and invasive question of what if people don't want what I offer? You are never going to know unless you actually try. You will never know what if people want it or not if you don't try it. No one has the opportunity to want it if you don't put it out there. Nobody can tell you anything, and you can't learn. Sure, the first time you put something out there, you may not get the response you want, but then that's useful. That is truly useful information. If you get, yes, this, not that, or like, oh, I really liked this part, but I couldn't commit because of blah, blah, blah. Like that is information you can use. If you're trying to create an offer in your business that will work, you have to make offers and try them. You have to get them in front of people and get responses, whether or not it's going to land. That is the only way you can't design your way out of this problem,
And oftentimes you have to stick with it for a little while as well,
Yeah.
because like the first time that you put it out, I mean, you haven't built the following or the foundation or the, people aren't expecting that on
Yeah.
the first one. So like it's only going to grow from that point. And that's what I found with a lot of the work that I do on my own as well as at ConvertKit. So ConvertKit really understands, yeah, like it's going to take, especially for brand content, a good
Mhm.
amount of time before we can expect to see a return on investment in terms of like traffic and engagement alone. So yeah, it's like you have to stick
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah. You got to stick with it. And I mean, I think that you take feedback from whatever happened and you modify how you're
Oh
putting
yeah,
it out
definitely.
there. But yeah, I mean, you have to trust that you know enough to start, and then you can kind of go from there,
It helps to
essentially.
hype yourself up to
Yeah.
um to sort of look at what you're doing and realize that you are an expert in many ways that other people don't, they can't see the vision that you can see. So that's sometimes what I do to when I'm experiencing doubt and specifically creative doubt around the output or the stuff that I'm making.
Yeah. Yeah. People can't see it, can't see your vision, and they definitely can't see your vision unless you show it. Like if you don't put it out there, nobody gets a chance to engage with it. That's just the end of the story.
Yeah.
All right. Amy says, what helps you decide a project is not just a good idea, but really worth pursuing? And conversely, what helps you decide when a project has run its course?
Could you read the first part of the question again?
What helps you decide if a project is just not a good idea, or is not just a good idea, but really worth pursuing? And conversely, what helps you decide that when a project has run its course? Like, when do you stop? Like, when do you look at something and you go like, oh, this is worth it, versus
Mm,
maybe not? Do you have any
yeah,
sense of like
I
how you
think
navigate that?
I think preparation helps. So setting yourself, all right, you set us like you give yourself this amount of time to make this thing and see if it's going to work. But how do you decide what the amount of time is that's appropriate to set as that period? So talking to people who might know. For me, it's like mentors of mine, producers who've had experience in this field, that kind of thing. And then you give yourself this amount of like runway, and then you're like, okay, if I these are what I want to see. These are the definitions of success for me to be able to keep running with this past this runway. And yeah, just commit to making stuff for that period of time. Like we just said, I think it takes like a little while for something to see whether or not it's working or not, or to get the kind of like results that you want to get from it. So giving yourself that amount of time and just committing to making the stuff for that amount of time, it helps. That's what I did with the series that I was doing.
Mhm.
And I was getting the results that I wanted in terms of which was all I set out to do was just make the work and show myself that I could do it, and also get some views on them in YouTube. But not only did I get that, I also got like um, better and better quality people that I was making films about, or higher, more famous people essentially. So I was like, okay, this is something that's working, and I'll keep running with it.
Yeah. And I think too, like there's you can do small test pieces of what you're doing potentially, and like put it in front of people. I judge it partly by like, that whole, so I teach this framework called the creative engine. And the first stage of the creative engine is collect, which is basically research, figuring out like what's in it, what are you going to do, and then decide what are you actually going to focus on, and what's the core of it, and all those kinds of things. Then act, and then reflect. So you go through this cycle, right? Um, and so in that collect phase, as you start making decisions about it, if you keep getting more excited about it, even if it feels really scary and like too big, then I think for me, it feels like a good idea. Then I'm like, this keeps coming back. This keeps coming back to me. And I keep thinking about this thing. I think it's a good idea. Like, I think it has legs for me personally. Whether it's going to be a good idea in the world or not, I can't know until I get further into it. But at least if it's going to sustain my interest and challenge me, then I know it's worth at least the next step of investment.
Yeah. And also, I mean, that's a good point. Be excited about it. Yeah. When I was making these films, I couldn't wait. Even no matter how late I got home after the interview, I just wanted to edit the interview because what they said was so resonant to me. That's how I knew that it was personally sustainable, because I was excited about it. And with anything creative, if you're not excited about it, I think people can often feel that, or it doesn't connect in the same way.
Well, and especially when you're doing the projects that are going to be your personal projects, you're going to put out there in the world using courage,
Yeah.
daring to be bad, all that other stuff. Those things are the bridge to the future opportunities that are going to come rolling your way. And if you can't feel like enthusiastic about that work and show your enthusiasm through the way you share it and the content of the work, people are they're not going to read that it's important to you, and they're not going to read that enthusiasm. And that's such a huge piece of the storytelling around the work, is your love and passion for it. I mean, it can be very, very weird work, and you can still find an amazing audience if you're super into it, and just kind of show that you're really into it. And, you have to live with it for a very long time. So, going inward and sort of figuring that out, I think, is super important.
And you can still be enthusiastic and have doubts at the same time. Just because you're having doubts doesn't mean you're not enthusiastic. There's a separation between them.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Those were great questions, you guys. Thank you so much for bringing the questions and showing up live today. Henry, thank you for being here with me for the Creative Business Design Lab.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it was really fun and just such a great conversation. I think I am very happy to have this topic, just to be able to dive into this topic, because it's just such a fraught one, but it's the pivot point between dreaming and doing. It's the pivot point between imagining something and being the thing. This is it. This is the thing that makes the difference, honestly.
I hope it helped. Yeah, I feel like we could have talked about so much more as well, but it's there's only so much you can cover in an hour.
There's only so much people can absorb. We'll just have to come back to it later.
Yeah,
I'll invite you back, Next time, we're going to have Sarah Marie Lacey, a portrait painter who has had crazy success getting into crazy rooms with people who want portraits. And so we're going to talk about networking, how to get into the room where it happens. That's going to be February 15th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And I hope I will see everybody there then. All right. Thanks a lot. See you next time. Bye-bye.